a little bit about my background. I mean, I did mention that I've been playing since 2013.
Right.
I knew how to play before that, but I never took it seriously. And I had the fortune to be in Cyprus. So in Cyprus, there
Cool.
was an up and coming poker scene. There were some decent casinos that had some good games. They had Poker Stars and WPT events. So I started doing the rounds, and I found I could navigate the lower stakes, and I was quite decent at tournaments. So I have a decent understanding of the game. Just that's just what I want to put forward. But I have some bad habits, and I realize I have the bad
We
habits.
all do.
Yeah, like I realize I understand the spot and I can outplay the spot, but I'm better doing this against good players. And when I come across players that don't have my understanding of the game, I over value their play and I don't do the correct thing, like folding. I keep
Right.
trying to bully them, and that is my downfall. And in the hand I gave you, it's a home game. They're very, very basic in their understanding of anything but the cards, let's say.
Hmm.
And pot odds and equity and plus EV moves that completely go out the window. So the pots get really big really quickly, and the hands you can get beat with king three off, 5-4 off, and your aces get cracked, your kings get cracked constantly. So it's really hard to navigate that table because it's always like 4 or 5 players filling the pot with money, and you go
Yeah.
in because it's if you lose 3 hands and you win one, or even if you lose 8 hands and you win one, at least you break even. So that was what I was trying to uh, put across.
No, I understand. Uh, it's the curse of the low stake games, right?
Yeah,
Uh, and and it magnifies infinitely when you play on the free sides. You can just see anybody with any two
yeah,
cards putting all the money. And low stakes is very close cousin to playing on with free money.
yeah,
But having said that, they are incredibly profitable games, right? You just have to understand that every game has its own approach and strategy. Not all battles are won with the same tactic, right? Um, First of all, oh, I'm curious. Where are you playing these games?
yeah. The game in question is a home game. It's a fun game.
Right,
We're all friends. Where there's
right.
no outsiders,
Yep.
and it's like just coming together and having a laugh. But it's they like it so much that they play a couple of times a week. It's not just a weekend with a couple of beers.
That's great.
This is just buddies. We
Yeah.
we 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 all hang out apart from this anyway. But I mean, this is just us having fun. But when we go to Cyprus, in Cyprus it's legal.
Yeah.
It's a different story. And in Cyprus, the games get big, and now I think Merit has like some of the biggest games on the planet. I think
Yes, they
Rob
do.
went over there, the Onyx Club. Yeah,
The reason I asked more specifically about where you're playing, because also culture plays into
mm.
poker a lot, right? I
Yeah,
right now I'm in Mexico and I play in Mexico, and low limit games are very different in Mexico than they are in United States, than they are in Europe, than they are in Turkey.
yeah,
They tend to culturally be more aggressive and more macho, so for the lack of a better word, and all of that you have to take into account about uh, behavioral patterns at lower stakes. Now, the hand that you sent to me, it's
it's
actually a
quite
very
similar.
interesting hand. If you want to go ahead and start it off, we can start breaking it and going into it.
Yes. So I'm sitting in the cutoff with Ace Jack suited. And so I'll start by telling you the tendencies. I can actually remember who was where. So Under the gun and Under the Gun +1 are actually quite well-informed players. Under the Gun is Old Man Coffee, and Under the Gun +1 is also bases his plays on theory, so he has a better understanding of the game than most. The
Right.
low jack is a careful player. He might enter the hands with speculative cards, or he might enter the game with speculative hands, but he'll back out when he knows he's not going to get him.
Right.
Um, the hijack is a little bit more liberal with his chips. He makes big bets. He plays wide ranges, but he also knows when he's beating the play. He might not know when he's beat, but he'll dominate you with a good hand. He's got a better understanding than most of the players there. The button is wild and crazy and has no idea what he's doing. And of course, it doesn't matter about the big blind and the small blind, who are also not good players. So I decide to, after it limps round to me, most, like 90% of the hands, they all enter with limps. So whenever I find myself with a playable hand, I try to raise the pot. So at least to isolate, because I'm not playing any hand against 4 or 5 players. It's just ludicrous.
Right.
Um,
Before you go on, let me ask you, what? How big is the game? What's the stakes?
okay, so the blinds there I put in units, and it's in the local currency.
Right.
Of course. Uh, it. I mean, you expect to get like what, 100 to 200 big blinds per hand in a decent if you're playing a big hand in a normal game. Here it can go way above that. So the pots get
Yeah, of
very big
course. But
very quick.
what is the blind so we
10, 10, 10.
but what are the blinds? 10-10?
10, 10.
Okay. And how deep are you?
Usually, we have stacks of
In
1,000
this
in front of us, on average. But uh, as the game goes on, people can have stacks of 3 to 5,000.
in this
With
particular hand, how are
in this
you?
particular hand, I have 800. I have 800. Yeah,
800 units.
yeah, 800. I think.
And you said it gets limped around to you in the cutoff.
Uh, the hijack raises to 60 before me.
Okay. So hijack opens for 60 and you decide to 3-bet.
Yeah. Now the reason I'm three
And what
bet
sizing did you use for that?
140.
Okay. Is it the open from the hijack, is that normal for that game to go 6 big blinds or
Yeah, I
uh,
mean,
uh
nobody folds against 6 big blind.
okay, but is that on the smaller size, bigger size for that game, for the game you're playing?
It's small. Like if someone doesn't want anyone to limp or wants to fill the pot, they'll start betting 60, 50. But
Okay,
they want everyone to put the same bet. It's not like they're doing it to isolate. They're doing it so that everyone will call. That's why I 3-bet, basically.
gotcha.
Because once they're
And
invested, they're going to
how
keep
did you
going, and they wanted to stop that.
okay. Now tell me about your thought process about how you came to 140 for your 3-bet.
Okay, so
Now,
uh,
before you go on, when I
yes,
ask these questions, it's not that I disagree with the number or your decision. It's just that I want to hear your thought
the thought process.
process.
Exactly. Well, I told you the player tendencies. And the guy who already made the bets, I'm not putting him on a very strong hand. Maybe an ace with a weak kicker offsuit at best. Because of the bet size and how I just explained why that certain bet sizing is used in that game.
Hmm.
Uh, ace jack is not a particularly strong hand against the range of these players because it's so wide, and multi-way ace jack is going to have a lot of problems. So when I bet like that and they know that I don't enter pots without raising, I'm letting them know that, you know, if you come in, you better have a strong hand. At least um, I think I should have gone maybe 180, 190, maybe not over 200. 140 is a bit on the edge for me in that specific spot, especially with ace jack. But it's a playable hand, and I was a little bit stuck, not too much, but I wanted people to join the pot. Maybe that's why I didn't go bigger.
Why did you want people to join the pot?
Well, the players behind me don't have a combinatorics understanding, so they'll call all my bets with in any pair, basically.
Right.
And they have tendencies to call up to 160, 180 in that situation. So I wanted to play with those players, even though I was OOP against. And the players before me might have slightly tighter ranges, and I could kind of put them on ranges easier and understand where I was in the hand. So if I'm playing against them, it would allow me not to lose the maximum if I decided that the flop wasn't playable against them. So, but on looking back, I think maybe I should have gone at least 170 for that bet.
Okay. A couple of things I want to point out in your thought process. There's a little bit of incongruence in your thought process. Um, w- at the beginning, you told me that these are the kind of players that would uh, that just play the strength of their hands, you know, and
Mhm.
you have multi-way pots quite often, right? And then you also mentioned that ace jack suited is not the kind of hand that plays well multi-way,
Yeah,
right? And then you also said that you wanted to keep the weaker players into the hand. You see how those three statements kind of conflict with
yeah,
each other, right? Uh, and in a vacuum, all those three statements are true. That's why uh, it's sort of easy to say and think through them while conflicting each other. But we have to look at it in the context of the game that you're at. If you have decided that ace jack does not play well multi-way, then your goal should be to go heads up as much as you can, right? If you've decided that these are people that um, are very loose and splashy, they're happy to put money in the pot, go multi-way with almost any holding, then your goal should be value extraction, right? Get as much as you can out of them while they're willing to put the money in, and
Mhm.
almost never bluffing them because they're willing to put the money in, right? So uh, I want you to start being aware that uh, don't change the goal of your bet in the middle of the hand. I strongly believe that every bet has only two functions. One is to get value from worse, or to get better hands to relinquish their equity, right?
yeah,
If you're trying to do both of those at the same time, your life is very, very difficult. Pick a line, right? And I think because you weren't able to be very clear about what your intention with that three bet is, you ended up with a number that didn't really accomplish anything because you didn't have a goal to accomplish, right? And I tend to agree with you. I think you should have gone larger and even much larger. You know, at a minimum, I would have gone 200. But
yeah,
you know, in a game where you have a strong holding and ace jack suited compared to all the wide ranges that these uh, uh, lower limit loose and splashy players play, it's actually at the top of the towards the top of the range. Ace Jack suited. Pile the money in while you can. You know, I would have gone personally 220, 230 easily.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I agree.
all right, but you did 140, and what happened after that?
Well, so after I call, of course, after I made that bet, the button calls because like he'll look at a queen 4 off and say, "Oh, I like this lady," and play.
Yep.
Maybe we hit 3 queens on the flop or something.
Yep.
And then, of course, because he's looser and splashier than everybody else, the blinds fall. The limpers fold, and the low jack decides to make the call because now he's getting priced in, and because he's aware of the player tendencies.
Okay.
He thinks maybe, in my mind, I think he's thinking of at the river he might be able to bet me out of the pot. He can play against the button player, and the player to his left is more timid than me, for example. Like maybe he won't end up with me to know where he is, but maybe he'll bet me out of the pot and stay heads up with the player who will call, any 2 pair, even if he's beat with a bigger
Yeah. And
hand.
low jack is the player that you said it was cautious. So I just want to be clear. Button calls, low jack calls,
Yeah,
right? And then
yeah.
after low jack?
The hijack, let's say the hijack folded. There's actually, let me explain this. The under the gun should be the one that's calling, but I wrote it here that he folded because I put a player in between. The hijack folded actually, and under the gun +1 and the low jack is the calling. So the low jack is actually the hijack.
Okay, so under the gun +1.
Is still in the game, yeah. But if you skip a player, it still works out the second way. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I just wanna be clear about who's in the pot still. Under the gun +1 calls, and then low jack calls, correct?
Yeah,
And then hijack folded.
yeah. Hijack folds.
Okay, perfect. And now, so we got the 4 players, right?
Yeah,
Um, so we have about 540 units to the flop, right?
yeah, yeah.
All right, and you get a flop of
The flop is 5 of clubs, 7 of diamonds, ace of hearts
ace of hearts. So you get top pair, decent kicker,
with a rainbow.
and yeah, pretty dry and rainbow board. All right. So what happened from there? What's the action from there?
So um, here again, it checks to me,
Okay.
and I bet 250 this time, which is
So
still in
under the gun
top.
+1 checks, low jack checks, uh, and you bet how much?
250.
250. Okay. Tell me how you came up with that number.
Okay, so I think it's the same process as before. I'm trying to build a pot since I have a very decent hand now on a rainbow
Hmm.
flop. I'm ahead of most of their ranges. I'm top of my range. I have a good position. I'm not worried about the player to my left because I know that he's whiffed. He could be playing 5-7, but I'm not worried about that. And I know that he's going to put money in the pot, even if he thinks he's got a 5% chance of hitting something.
Hmm.
So maybe I'm going to get 2 more callers and 1 fold with this. So again, maybe here's the mistake continuing from the previous betting round, where I'm not betting big enough because it's the same logic.
Let me ask you this. I asked you what your starting stack was, but were you
Hey,
effective or was somebody else effective?
excuse me?
Were you effective, or
No,
somebody else?
there was another bigger stack. I was slightly on the smaller size. I think the button and me had similar stacks, and the
Okay,
low jack and the hijack had
let
slightly
me
bigger
ask you
stacks.
this. The definition of effective size gets kind of confused by a lot of players today.
Yeah.
If do you know what I mean by when I say who's effective?
Well, in my understanding, it's if that particular stack is putting money in the pot, then you're all in.
No,
According, I mean, he.
the effective size is the stack that is the smallest.
Okay, so I'm not that. I think it's the low jack that's the hijack that's effective.
Okay, so
So I
well,
know yeah, yeah. Sorry about that.
so wait a minute. I thought hijack folded. Under the gun plus one called the flop. Low jack calls. So between under the gun plus one, low jack, button, and you, who is the effective?
The low jack.
The low jack is effective. And do you remember what he started the hand with? How much?
He he started the hand with around 700.
Okay,
He was
perfect.
slightly lower than me. Maybe it could be a little bit lower, but I might have rounded that up for simplicity reasons.
Okay. Uh, Now I'm gonna kind of get into why that's important. The effective size, the smallest stack in any given hand, is going to drive the decisions of your bet sizing, right?
Mhm.
Um, so how you structure your bet sizes has a lot to do with how big is the smallest stack into that pot, right?
Yeah,
Into that hand, right? So right now, when you bet 250, right? The effective stack is 700 minus 140, right? So that
yeah,
he's got uh, he has 550 behind, right?
yeah.
That's critical in your bet sizes. Because if you bet 250, right? Uh, how is that going to incentivize the action for that player who has just checked to you, right? Let's find out. You bet 250, what happened?
Well, let me just remember this. Okay, so I bet 250. Um, the button calls. Everybody calls.
Okay.
The other three players call.
All right. So here's the difficulty of bad sizing. So now the pot is about 1,540, right? You just put another 1,000 in there, right? Now, essentially, uh, you and the low jack, and I don't know about the other stack sizes, but your pot committed. You committed yourself to this pot, right?
Yeah.
And when I ask you how you came up with that number 250, I want to hear you thinking about these stack sizes. Oftentimes at the lower stakes, even at the higher stakes, this is the most ignored part of the hand. I want you to kind of start to get into the habit of whenever you are getting involved in a hand, be aware of stack sizes of every single person who is going to be involved in that pot. The people before that have acted before you and the people left that are going to act after you. You should know. Take a moment and look at their stack sizes, because every decision you make is going to be based on the
Not-
the, the stack sizes that you face, right? I think if you were more aware of stack sizes, especially the effective stack sizes, your pre-flop bet would be bigger. I really don't like 250 for a number of reasons. Uh, it could have gone either way. You should either be betting very, very small in this spot, or you should be betting very, very big, right? For very different reasons. That middling number that commits you without really extracting value, it doesn't, again, accomplish anything,
I agree. Yeah. I think
right?
this is one of my biggest issues. And I think this is a recurring thing I have. And I'm glad we got to this point. I'm sure there are other issues. I find that when I bet small, it's a feeling that I think I shouldn't mix my feelings when I'm playing, but it's a feeling I won't be able to control the pot. I think that's also a misgiving. And when I bet too big, I
That's a
think
huge
I
misgiving.
also
That's a huge misgiving.
lose control.
That's
Sorry, that's mine.
No, no worries. That's a
Um,
huge misgiving. By betting small, you're allowing yourself to have a lot more control over the pot.
mhm, mhm. I understand that now. I mean, I've been when I was
Yeah,
watching your videos and I've been reading some more. I realize now that small bet sizing has a lot of versatility, especially at the turn, uh,
absolutely.
after the flop and at the turn, to be able to determine what your opponents are thinking, what they're playing, their ranges, and what they're going to do next. And it's something I haven't incorporated at all. And maybe it's one of the biggest leaks in my game.
Well, we're going to talk about it more, but I want to finish this hand first. So
Yeah.
you bet 250, everybody calls. The pot is 1540, and you go to a turn. What's the turn card?
The turn now is the 10 of clubs.
10 of clubs, bring in a backdoor flush, but really, uh, other than that, and even at that, it's a total brick, right? Unless somebody's
Yeah,
in there with ace 10 or something.
it's quite insignificant. True.
Yeah. And how did the action go from here?
Low jack checks, hijack checks, and I decide.
You mean under the gun +1 checks and then low jack
Yeah, yeah,
checks.
yeah. I've got it
Yeah.
wrong. uh, yeah, and then I decide, as you correctly mentioned before, because I'm priced in, to finish all decisions and just go all in.
You jam for the remainder of, what was that,
Mainly
250? Yeah, 410?
410, yeah.
410. So you have a very, the SPR, stack to pot ratio, is very, very shallow, right? For you,
Yeah.
you have
Funny.
400 into 1540, which, would bring the pot to almost 2000. So anyone with anything is going to put the
To
money
call.
in, right?
Yeah.
So if anybody has any sort of draws, and I read this hand, it seemed like by the turn, somebody had a flush draw and somebody had a straight draw. They're
Yeah.
not gonna walk away from it, and they're gonna put the money in. They have to put the money in. They're maybe not the straight draw so much, but certainly the flush draw. He's getting a good price um, to do it. Now let's let's kind of walk back this hand a little bit and go back to the pre-flop section. If
Mhm.
you had bet, as I would have preferred you to bet, something along the lines of 230 or
230,
250, right?
250 even. Yeah.
I don't think you would have ended up going to the flop for four ways, right? I
Mhm.
think I think you would have gone heads up with the initial opener, right? But let's say you let's say there's no way to avoid that. You would have got in there. That's good. That's what you want. You got, while you have good value, you want to get the money in.
Yeah.
If you had bet let's say 250, right? Right. You go into the flop, 4 ways, that's $1,000 in the pot, right?
Yeah.
And you have how much behind? 650, right? Now you're it's a perfect spot for you for a jam,
Yeah.
right? It's a perfect size, right? And your opponents don't have any draws left, so you could have gotten those straight draws and flush draws,
Ooh.
and maybe
Yeah.
got called by a weaker ace or a weaker pair or whatever, right? Or win the pot outright, right? I think this problem often at the lower stakes is a problem of bet sizing. Bet sizing, bet sizing, bet sizing. There's a couple of things with lower stakes. You're not facing that at a home game, but in lower stakes, if you go to casinos, you will often see that they're capped games,
Yeah.
right? Why is that? Because it's the casino has an incentive to keep the games soft.
Sorry,
Nice
that's
cat.
little, yeah, he's a little stray. Yeah.
It is much
The
harder to play deep stack, right? So when the stacks are deep, players kind of shy away from the game. So casinos cap the games to keep the worst players in, to make it easier,
Yeah,
right?
that's their biggest customer.
Yeah. Now, working that backwards to our advantage, it becomes clear that when stacks are deep and you know how to play post flop, you have a huge edge over your opponents. But to know how to play post flop in deeper stacks, you need to be aware of stacks and your sizing, right? I'm a strong believer that if you are deep enough effective, let's say I'm playing against another opponent that we're both 1,000 big blinds deep, right? I can play any two cards. The degree to which my hand is playable is directly correlated to the depth of the stack and my ability to play it, right? Uh, uh, think about it like this. Um, if you have pocket aces, right? Regardless of your stack size, it's really easy to play that hand, right? If you have 5 big blinds, what do you do with that hand?
You shove.
You shove. If you have 100 big blinds, what do you do with that hand?
Well, you bet big, especially if you're
You
in
bet big.
position.
The
Yeah.
decision is very simple, right?
Yeah.
Now, what if you have pocket tens instead of pocket aces, and you have 5 big blinds? What do you do?
You shove again. I mean,
You shove again. The decision is easy because
is
you're short stack.
yeah,
But
so
now, what if you have 1,000 big blinds and you have pocket tens?
yeah. You
The
try to
decision
protect
becomes
that fixed
very
strength.
much more convoluted, much more complex, right?
Mhm.
Because the only thing that changed is the depth of the
Mhm.
stack, the effective stack, right? The cards remain the same, right? So if you can navigate that depth while your opponents can't, right? And you can pick better bet sizing, more effective bet sizing that when you have value, extracts value from your opponent. And when you have bluff, puts pressure on your opponents to execute those bluffs and get those equity laydowns, then you can run the game. Then you can manage the game, right? I think from this, just analyzing this one hand, it's very clear that the area that I would highly recommend that for you to focus on right now is bet sizing and stack awareness. From the very beginning, when you started to explain the hand to me,
Mhm.
the one area you left out is the effective, the how much money's on the table. What stakes are we
Yeah.
playing? I mean, in your note, you told me what stake you were playing, but
Mm.
I had no idea what the stack depth is, and
Yeah.
every decision is dependent on that. That's core principle of
Mhm.
fundamental good
Mhm.
poker, to know the amount of bullets in the gun, so to speak,
Yeah.
the
And
ammunition that you're going to war with, right? So, I do like your aggression, right? But I want you to put a purpose behind that aggression, right? And this ties into stack depth, right? I
yeah.
want, when you're betting, be very clear about why you're betting. If you're betting for value, right? I want you to start actually trying to come up with a list of hands that your opponent would call you with, that you have beat, that you dominate, right? And if you can't, perhaps maybe that's a clue that you shouldn't be betting for value, right?
Yeah.
Uh, if you're betting for equity denial, I want you to imagine, okay, I have pocket jacks here. There's, a king on the board. What do I have to bet? How much do I have to bet to get a king, a random king, in this range of possible kings, to lay down his equity? Again, this all goes into uh, the depth of stack, and also profiling your opponent. These guys very well,
Yeah.
so you can profile them very well. Um, these th- these smaller games, these home games, have their own set of challenges, but they are very beatable. The only thing that comes along with that beatability is high variance. When you win, you can win big. When you lose, you can lose big.
Big.
But if you bankroll yourself properly and you play uh, the plus EV game that you should be, you are going to be climbing to the right corner of the graph. Um, but they're very beatable. Like, sometimes I talk to my clients, and I make the analogy that, um, let's say you're playing uh, with your nieces or nephews. They're 5 years old, right? You're playing poker.
Mhm.
What strategy do you use against them? If you were
Okay,
to
that's
divide the strategy,
mhm.
what strategy would you say is
Well,
most
if
effective?
if I was playing with my nieces and nephews, I mean, do I let? Am I being nice to them, or am I playing to win?
No, 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 no. You're never playing poker for being nice. You play against your grandmother
No.
to take her money.
Uh, no, well, I'm going to be playing the higher ranges, because they don't, if they don't know how to play, they're going to be playing any two cards, and I'm going to be careful to dodge stupid pot spots.
Okay, that's half the equation, right? You're gonna play value hands, right? While they're playing any
Yeah,
two cards. It's
and
gonna
and
give
I'm
you a
going to bet
huge edge.
big because it's going to scare them.
And you're gonna bet big because they're gonna call you.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, not
they
because
want
you want to scare them, because you want to extract value,
value.
right? You're never gonna
Exactly.
bluff them, right? You're just
Okay.
gonna bet huge, play your good cards, get value, and once in a while you're gonna get cooler.
Yeah.
That's okay, right? Now,
Okay.
on the other side of the scale, right? If uh, if at this extreme is your 5-year-old nieces and nephews, uh, at the other end of the scale is someone who's very skilled at the game, right?
Mhm.
And has no detachment to the money,
Mhm.
right? That person is the scariest opponent to face. Someone who's very, very good, right? Unlike your nieces and nephews, and the money means nothing to them,
Nothing.
right? It's just the tool. They have no emotional attachment to them,
Yeah.
you know? And if you look at the higher echelons of the cash world, in the cash game, these are the monsters that lie there,
Yeah.
the Phil Ivies, the Garrett Adelsteins,
Okay.
the Alan Keaton, right? Uh, we want to get there, right? We want to be those guys, right? But what we have to be very, very cautiously and continuously aware of is that our opponents are not those guys, right? We are playing our opponents. We have to identify who they are and adjust to them. We can't expect them to adjust to us, right? And this is what makes Alan Keaton a monster,
Yeah.
right? He can identify where your imbalances are and put extreme pressure on it, either for value extraction or fold equity, right?
Yeah.
This is what we want to do, right? With the group that you're playing, you almost have no fold equity,
Yeah.
right? So you better get after value extraction. And how do we get the maximum value extraction? By understanding bet sizing and by understanding how to structure the, if we're trying to get value, how to structure our betting so we can get all the money in,
Yeah.
right? Or
Mm.
how to control the pot, you know? Like going back to the hand that you discussed, going with your pre-flop bet of 140, which was on the on the smaller size, on the flop, because our pre-flop bet was so small, I actually would want to go for a much smaller bet, right?
Mm.
Why? Or maybe even check. Because if let let's go with the extreme. Let's say you check, the pot gets checked through, right, on the flop, right? And you go to a turn, which was the ace, the 10 of clubs,
And of
right?
clubs. Mhm.
And the pot is still 540, right? Now what happens if you jam? Now a
It's
flush
a
draw,
then
a
flop.
straight draw. Yeah, if you exactly. If you jam now, if you put your remaining, if you bet 660 into 540, you're over betting the pot, right? And now it puts tremendous amount of pressure on the flush draw and the straight draw, right? So
And probably the effective stack would have folded.
yes, the effective stack would have folded. I think both of those they should fold, you know,
Yeah.
the flush draw, and because the flush draw has only about 18% to make his hand, and the straight draw has 12% to make his hand, right? Even less,
Yeah.
right? So they should fold, and if they call, that's great for you. You want that call. You make your opponent make an unprofitable, mathematically bad call. That's great. You want that, right? And if they hit it, they hit it. So be it, right? But
I think right
strategically,
there is my yeah. What you just said.
go on.
The realization that I want them to call makes me make these small bets that lead to mistakes further on in the hand. So I know that I know I should want them to call. My intention is always to get them to put money in the pot because, however, the bet sizing. I mean, looking it back at it again and listening to the points you made, spot on. I mean, that that mid-level bet size is always problematic, and I've realized that.
Yeah, I think we need to become far more clear about um, why we're betting and how to structure it. And this is something that uh, that is very achievable. I think we can work on that and get it done. Um, I think right now, uh, that's that's the biggest leak, that if you plug, you can really level up your game,
Yeah.
right? Of course, we all have poker is a game of infinite possibilities. So there's, there's infinite leaks we all have. But I think this is the one that is really going to affect your game if you can work on that. Now, I do have a couple of recommendations for you. Have you heard about the my assessment that I have is called the LeakHunter.
Yeah, actually, I was going to mention that. I should have done my homework before coming here. I'm going to do that. I have it set up. It's just because I need to allocate an hour of full concentration to that, so I get an honest
Okay.
feedback from that. Yeah.
Okay. I I really recommend it because it does go into it analyzes your game on 5 different levels, right? And it gives a really deep insight about uh just what areas we need to work on,
Yeah.
right? And also it creates a starting point, a foundational point where we can build on, right? Um, it's it, it will take you about an hour to take,
Yeah.
so make sure um, that you're ready for it. You know, your mind is clear, and answer the questions as honestly as uh, you can. Like sometimes when we're reading the options, the better choice kind of becomes a little obvious to us,
Mhm.
but answer it how you would play in reality, because the goal is not to ace the test. The goal is to identify where we need to work on your game, right? So in that regard, be very transparent and be very honest. Um, the just because having that test and running it costs me money, I have to charge $30 for it just to cover the cost of servers and everything. But I'll promise you this: if you purchase your results, we'll do another call together, and I will go through the results with you.
I'd love that, and I want to do this. These are things that I understand, but looking at it from a interior perspective, you're blind, and in the
Yeah,
moment, you have this logic that you're actually fooling yourself with, even if you do know the right answer. And when you look back at it, you're like, why did this happen? I think these types of conversations are immensely valuable for the long term. So it needs to
I,
become a habit. Yes, basically.
I couldn't agree with you more. And you know, um, I give you a little bit of background about myself. I for 22 years I was a professional pilot, and I was also in the training department for different airlines, working with different pilots. But before I got into the airline world, uh, the career progression goes from go to flight school and then you become immediately an instructor teaching someone else who's never flown on how
Yeah.
to become a pilot. Um, it wasn't until I started instructing that I became an excellent pilot.
Mhm.
Why? Because my students forced me to think about things that I didn't think about before, right? They'd ask me questions. I had to solve their problems. And I genuinely enjoyed that process. And I realized to master anything, you have to teach it,
Yeah.
right? Uh, and at the same time, uh, anyone at the highest level of their profession, their game, in any field, be it an athlete or a politician or anyone, they have a confidant, they have a coach, someone who sees their blind spots when they can't see it, right? Uh, so I played poker for about 20. I started in 2003 when I was in university,
Mhm.
and poker has changed greatly over the years.
Different,
And
different thing.
uh, uh, because I was flying and I had a real job, I wasn't always playing. Sometimes I would go a few months without playing. And when I decided that I'm going to play poker full time, I realize how far behind the curve I am, right? Because of all the solvers and all the things that advanced our knowledge into this beautiful game, I was way behind. I went from being a very profitable player to just completely lost.
Mhm.
That's when I decided to study the game more, you know? So I started studying it and writing about it. This is my process. And, uh, that turned into a book, and then I started coaching friends and people around in my local card room, and I love the process, and I realized that everyone can use it. And my 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 quote has always been, "What does Daniel Negreanu, Tiger Woods, and Michael Jordan have in common? They all have coaches."
Yeah.
Um, so I started my YouTube channel. I decided that I'm gonna try to reach out to people. I created a course. I created this, and that's how I got to know Andreas. And I went and played with him in London. Lovely chap, lovely guy.
Yeah.
So my message is now: you're not where you want to be, because you're watching me, you're watching Andreas, you're watching all the other poker content creators. Let's get you there. And the only way to get you there is one-on-one coaching, be it with me or Andreas or anyone else that you trust and you respect and you value their opinion. You, you need to sit down and talk to them.
Yeah.
They need to get to know you. You need to get to know them. And most importantly, there are two rules in there. You need to have similar playing styles, right? Because if you're a lag, you like action, and I'm an absolute GTO nit, right? I cannot help you. You know, that's just something that's
You have
part
conflicting.
of our personality, right? I can't change you as a person, right? I believe people play poker how they live. If I live like a laggy player, I play like a laggy player. If I live like a nitty player, my place probably looks like a museum, very tidy and neat, right? Uh, I tend to be on the laggy side. I like action, I give action, I get action, and I like to exploit, right?
Yeah.
I hate charts. So if my personality meshes with someone, great. But if they are the nitty kind of client, that I can't help them. I would love to, but I can't. So that's important. The other thing that's important is, uh, for the same reason that we don't talk strategy at the table, don't seek uh, help or advice from people that you play with or friends, because there's always a sense of gatekeeping and secret keeping, because you might be close friends, but you're natural enemies,
And yeah,
right?
I mean,
You battle.
you.
So with that said, is if you want your game to improve, the best way you can do it is to find a mentor, right? Now, there are three areas that anyone's game can improve. One is knowledge, skill, and execution, right? Knowledge and skill kind of fall into the same category. It's just things that you need to learn, right? And learn how to do. And then execution is, how do we actually do it? You know, show me. You know, you can't learn execution from a book,
Yeah.
but you can get knowledge from a book,
Yeah.
right? You can get some execution from a course, some skill from a course, but execution really comes down to one-on-one coaching.
Yeah.
When I identify people that really lack knowledge, I tell them to go buy a book or buy a course. Because yes, it's true that you can get knowledge by one-on-one coaching, but that's just a waste of your money,
Yeah.
right? For the price of a book, you um, you can get so much more knowledge than it would take you paying a coach per hour, right? So my recommendation to you right now is, let's figure out what you need, right? We identified one area that you kind of need to work on, which is understanding bet sizing and how effective stack sizes affect your decision, and how you need to tailor your decision based on the goals that you want to set for the hand. But let's dive deeper. And the way we're going to do that is with the
The
leak hunter.
LeakHunter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I would highly
one way
recommend you
you
go on. I'm sorry?
no, one way you summarize this is your precision in, profits out. Uh, that's how you summarize this.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. That that used to be my uh my slogan, and it still is, right? To try to, uh, uh, get people to come and seek to improve their game. That was my motto: precision in, profits out, right? And it's
Contextually,
still great, but it's no longer my motto. My motto is: you want to improve your game, you need coaching. That's my motto. Precision and profits out is the solution.
yeah, but I mean, when you talk about execution, that's what I was referring it to.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And precision in, let me go into that a little bit. Precision and profits out is very, very clear. It kind of comes from garbage in, garbage out in the computer world. If I have a if I have a system that makes decisions and I put bad information into it, I'm going to get bad outcome, right? So precision in is very important, but that has two sides. One is math, right? And that includes understanding pot odds, understanding equity, understanding break even percentages, understanding frequencies, understanding implied odds, all of that. But those are very mechanical, right? Once you understand them once, you understand them forever,
yeah,
right? I can sit down and teach those to you in about 4 hours, right? But there is another side of precision in, right? Which is your opponent, right? Their tendencies, their behavior, for example, if I have all this data based on pot odds and break even frequencies and break even percentages, how does that apply to the person sitting in front of me? That part becomes an art, right? There's the science, the math, then there's the art of the precision in part. And you can work on both of those simultaneously. One is much more easier to attain, which is the science. Once you understand it, the math is never going to change. The opponent in front of you continuously changes session after session. Even if it's the same person, it could be in a different mood, right? This is where you at the table need to get off your phone and pay attention to hands that you're not involved in,
yeah,
right? That's really where you make your money, right?
yeah,
Watching showdowns that you're not in. That's so much valuable information in there, right? There's a lot of things that I can go into that will help you understand your opponent better and be able to apply the science, the mathematical part of precision in to that opponent to get the profit
yeah,
that we're looking for, right?
yeah.
So that's my goal.
Yeah, so I agree. And execution here is paramount. I will say that I used to study, but I'm sure I'm a bit rusty on some of the math. So maybe during the League Hunter, those will come be apparent as well, because of course certain things have changed according to Solver World. So I'm a bit behind in those aspects.
That's fine. There's no shame in that. Yeah, what we are trying to do is we're trying to turn all the rocks over and see what's under them and fix it.
Thank you. That this has been eye opening. Especially with the bet sizing. I was aware that there was something wrong there. It wasn't this clear to me though. And um, the thing about playing with um, people who have a hard time reading the table, not just the cards, but in general, is that when I make a mistake, it's not that I'm exploiting them. It's just that I'm opening myself up to being exploited, even although they're not aware that.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's terrible for me. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, one common uh, saying among poker players and coaches is that we make money at poker when our opponent makes a mistake,
Exactly.
right? If we play perfect poker, right? Let's say you and I are playing together, heads up.
Mhm.
You play perfect GTO, game theory optimum, which is unexploitable, right? And I play unexploitable, right? As well. You don't make money, I don't make money.
Yeah.
We just pay rake.
Yeah.
Right? The only way I can make money is if you make a mistake. Right? So I make money when you make a mistake. And I make more money when you make a mistake that I notice that I capitalize on.
Yeah.
Right? So you're absolutely right. When you make a mistake, you're just handing over money to your opponent. Right? What you want to be is you want to make less mistakes than your opponent. And when they make a mistake, you want to be aware of it and be there with the trap door right under them. You really want to capitalize on your opponent's mistakes. But to do that, you have to understand what is a mistake,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
We don't often know what is a mistake. And this is the stuff that we work on to improve our game.
Fantastic. I really appreciate this time you put in, and it's been
Yeah, my pleasure.